Hey, Rob. How are you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
So I have Rob Chase here with me, and he is running for re-election in District 4,
That's right.
State Legislature, Position 2. Rob, just tell us a little bit about your time that you've had in the legislature and what is prompting you to continue to run for re-election.
Well, Dale, I took sort of a circuitous path to actually being a state legislator. I never always thought politics was something other people did, not me. And then in my 40s, probably in the 1990s, I got the internet. And then I started finding out a lot of stuff that I had never heard before. I didn't hear it on the mainstream news, and I never learned it in civics class. And then I realized our country's in trouble. I need to do something. I was a little bit young for Vietnam, just old enough to have to enlist, but I spent 6 years in Army Reserves, and but our fathers had all been heroes, and you from England, they were all, that generation were heroes, and I think after Normandy, in 10 months, Germany surrendered, and then in Japan, MacArthur was island hopping, they had victory shortly thereafter too, but it seemed like it started getting bogged down in the Korean War. And then Vietnam, I had a couple of cousins who got shot up in Vietnam, and when they came back, they said, "We're not even trying to win this thing." And then, I thought, well, it's probably a good thing I didn't go over then. And then, what really kind of got me going was, I think, I joined the Libertarian Party, and I like the libertarian precepts of I cannot have my rights unless I'm willing to extend them to others, because I was a fairly new Christian at that time. Sounded to me like the golden rule. And the other thing was Augustine and Aquinas' just war theory, which was, how to wage a war. Because, the Old Testament, they were directed to kill every man, woman, and child in a village. Well, how do you go from that to turning the cheek or loving your enemy? But the Bible's got to be consistent because it's truth. God is speaking truth. So how do you iron those things out? And the other thing I liked was free markets, on consumer items. Now, have since decided, well, some things have to be public solutions, like the interstate commerce and defending the country from enemies, foreign and domestic. And also like dams, for instance, that's a public solution. You just can't go buy a dam, or you and a bunch of your friends get together and build a dam. So, finding the right balance there. And then I started realizing, which I really wasn't even familiar with, how wonderful the Constitution was. The United States Constitution is, United States is a republic, but with the Constitution it has a rule of law. And, so you follow the Constitution. It says what the federal and the judiciary and the legislative or Congress powers have, separation of powers, and it all works out. So
it also says what power they don't have,
exactly,
which is even more important.
Only those things enumerated within the original Constitution, as enacted, is what you should go by. Now, the states, the states created the federal government. The colonies all got together, they became states, and they created the federal government, but they also created the counties too. So right in the middle, you have the states. And actually, the states have a lot of power, because anything not in the Constitution, which should stay small, as far as their powers go, Article 1, Section 8, belongs to the states to do. So there's a lot of things you can do at the state. If, say, for health care, if you want single payer, you can do it in your state. Or if you want a free market with lots of people, lots of competitors, which I would like to see, then you can do it that way too. So that's why I think I was actually ran for Congress twice, and that was in my libertarian time. I knew when Bush was going to invade Iraq that I knew it was going to be a big mistake. It was going to be Vietnam all over again, and we were going to spend a lot of money and get a lot of people killed. And that's when I first started hearing about Ron Paul. Ron Paul was a congressman, and he said, well, we should do a letter of marque and reprisal, like I think Jefferson did with the Barbary pirates. It was just kept it very small, and they solved the problem. They didn't stay there forever, and get a whole lot of people killed, spent a lot of the treasury, which we print now. We don't have a gold standard anymore. So I really liked that idea. So I ran for Congress the first one I ran for state Senate. and Bob McCaslin Sr. was in that position. And I got 5%, but hey, I did my, I
put your name out there.
Put my flag up, and not 5% people saluted, and then but we became pretty good friends. And Bob Sr. became one of my mentors. He said, Rob, you kind of need to get into, if you really want to serve, you need to become one of the two major parties. And so eventually I did. So I ran against George Nethercutt in 2002, and I got 5% again. But at least I got to go on TV.
And that was for Senate?
That was for Congress.
Okay.
Yeah. He was our congressman before Kathy McMorris. Okay. And then, so George voted to go over there. And, I said, well, none of the people on those planes, because it's all stemmed from 9/11, none of them were Iraqis or Afghans, so why are we invading these countries? And in fact, they're all Saudis. And, they all got them all out of the country. But, the debt at that time, during the Reagan administration, it went over $1 trillion. Well, by then it was $6 trillion. And I thought, well, that's horrific. We need to balance the budgets. We can't keep printing money we don't have. And today it's over $30 trillion. So we're on this trend that I think will lead to disaster. So in fact, I started running. I was going to run for Congress again 3 years ago. And then Matt Shea decided to go into the ministry. He was a legislator then, and he asked me to run for his spot. So that's how I got here today. A circuitous route. And then, in fact, in between, I actually did get elected county treasurer twice. And so I took a 2-term pledge, and I honored that. And then I ran for commissioner, but I didn't prevail in that. So, but that was kind of good for me because the commissioners, it's all about public safety and land use pretty much. Whereas in the legislature, there's a whole myriad of things you get to address and study and hear expert witnesses on. So it's a lot more, I think, engaging and fun. So I'm glad where I'm at.
So with the passing of Roe v. Wade now, or the overturning of Roe v. Wade, I should say, the power has been passed back to the states to legislate abortion, essentially. And so I'm just going to read your response on the survey of question 4 of life.
Oh, sure.
And we'll just talk a little bit about that. So our statement is that God created man in his image. The duty of civil government is the protection of innocent human life from conception until natural death. The issue application is that Washington State's reproductive privacy rights law allows minors to obtain abortions without parental consent. Additionally, this law requires taxpayer-funded abortions on demand. Late-term abortions are legal throughout all 9 months of pregnancy in Washington because of the vague way that viability is defined in this law. The response is that the reproductive privacy rights laws need to be challenged and or repealed at both the state and local levels. You responded to 10 that you strongly agree with us. And so with I think now with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the timing it couldn't be better in a way, because now we have an opportunity as Christians and as conservatives to say, hey, this midterm is more important than ever. We need to get people who are pro-life into the legislature so that we can block abortion laws and that we can write bills that are pro-life. And so just tell me a little bit about what your position is on the life issue.
Well, it's the problem was, okay, you can't do anything about it because the federal government's already, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. But it seemed like judges, they all disagree on what the Constitution actually means. And if you are a legislator and you have a Christ-centric view of the world, and you believe Christ is the author of life and he commands you follow his precepts and his will, then life has to begin with a zygote, when the egg and sperm come together, and then that's the beginning. So you really can't draw the line anywhere. So even the morning after pills, are...
I agree, it's abortion to me.
I think one of the problems knowing people that are pro-choice is I just don't think they're really using their sensitivity or imagination. I think they're kind of ignoring the inner voice, that we all get. So they justify that and say, well, it wouldn't live outside the womb. Well, a full-born baby won't live outside the womb very long.
Right.
But still, it's an innocent life, and you have to protect it, even if it's has birth defects or whatever. God made that person.
Right. A child wouldn't live outside the womb if I don't feed it. So therefore, is it not life at that point?
But yet that's the funny thing is I saw where the New York Assembly they all cheered when they went for full-term abortions. I mean, that's kind of a sign of where the country is going. So you're reading the Bible like we do, then you see God will bless one generation, but doesn't take the next generation comes up and they go completely that. We've seen that in our own lifetimes. So a lot of us are just in the Superman comic books. There was like another world that he would go to called Bizarro World, where none of the laws worked. Right. It was totally different and bizarre. And it's kind of like our state and our country are becoming that way. It's just I cannot. In fact, we have legislative prayer meetings. We get together, both Republicans and Democrats, kind of equal number. But yet I know that these people vote for those things, and so they're just not. They're ignoring, I think, the promptings of the Holy Spirit, or they become compromised through secular humanism, or they're building their own idols to worship that agree with them.
It's like you're ignoring the morality that's been taught by the creator of the universe.
And that's why I say we've got to get back to first principles.
Right. I mean, it's like saying, hey, I believe in the Bible and I'm going to pray and I'm going to do these things, but I'm going to ignore what the creator of the Bible and the creator of all things says about life.
Yeah, and there's only one God, and I think I can't remember who authored the book, The God Who Is There. Well, there is a God, and he is there independent of us, and that's who is God. So we have to, seek him and find him.
Right.
We can't create our own gods that, that will make us feel better about ourselves or more comfortable with our decisions.
Right. And it's really about framework and structure. And I've never met a woman who has had an abortion that has been proud of having that abortion thereafter. And the guilt and the shame that comes along with these things might not be immediate because they may not in that moment understand the implications and the ramifications of what has happened. But years later, for example, I've heard stories of women who it isn't until they have a child, like they get married and then they have a child and then they really start feeling guilt and feeling these emotions from a trauma that happened 5-10 years ago that they thought they had overcome. And so it isn't just harmful to the life of the child, it's harmful to the mother too. And I think we often, especially people who are pro-choice, they don't care about that nor look at it. They just say, oh, well, it's fine. But fine for who?
Yeah,
it's fine for you because perhaps you've never done it and you're out saying, well, it's my right, my choice, my body, my choice. But what about the choice of the child? And so the child doesn't get to say that, whether they live or die. And I would imagine they'd say...
I kind of think they're haunted. Even though they won't admit it, they're probably kind of haunted about it and in denial. Because, they've got to see other children, and children are very appealing, cute little children. And then they must think, well, what would mine have looked like,
Right.
Because had someone told me the other day, well, children are overrated. I said, well, no. My children were the best thing that ever happened to me.
It's like, were you overrated when you were a child? Because you were a child once. So what does that mean? I don't even understand what that means.
My mother, they did tell her to get an abortion with me when she was pregnant with me because of complications she'd had from having my sister. Just, we're only like 11 months apart. But she was Catholic, and then but I think she also knew that, once she got to know me, she would love me and give her life for me. So she said no, and everything turned out okay.
Yeah, and just trusting that God will do the right thing. And so what would you say to people who would say, well, Rob, what about in the instance of incest or rape, and what about exceptions for those things? So so if there's a bill that's passed and it says, okay, no abortions except for these circumstances, where would you stand on that issue?
Well, I think there's one where I think incest and rape, the mother may have to go to a different state or something. But I think the only thing that is feasible, if both mother and child are expected to die, then it might make some sense. I forget what that term is. It's something they call it a type of pregnancy where that could happen. But I think even incest and rape is, the collateral damage from those things. We're becoming a less moral society, so those things do happen, and the mother's a victim. But I mean, there's always been victims. I mean, you read about warfare up until maybe even recently. There would be rape of all the captured women,
right?
And then they would produce children. But I think when they had those children, it wasn't the best of conditions, but they would raise them, they would love them and not murder them.
Yeah,
and the same thing. I've seen people have like severely challenged children, but they actually even almost love those more than a normal child.
Right, and I know of someone who was a product, I guess you would say, of rape, and when he was in Christian school, this topic would come up all the time, and they would say, well, what about the issue of rape? And he really changed the thought process of his entire class, because he would say, but I'm a rape. I'm a product of rape, and my mom kept me, and his mom would tell him every day, it was hard for me to keep it, but you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And so, and I was talking to Brian Noble yesterday, and he gave me a perspective on this, because this is something I really have thought through a lot, and went back and forth on, well, God, what about in those instances? And this isn't even as men, this is people won't understand, man or woman, whether what that woman is going through who has been a victim of rape and has been a victim of incest. Man or woman, you don't understand that, and you could never understand without being in that situation. You can comprehend it, but you're never going to apprehend it. And so the point I'm making is that we should prop up those women as best as possible and encourage them not to. And so I've gone back and forth on this. And Brian Noble said to me yesterday, he said, that gives, as a Christian community, we should rally around that person. We should lift them up. And then it gives that person the opportunity to be the most Christ-like they could be in their life.
No, that's true, because you could say you're pro-life and all that, but then what about the children that the mother does give birth to, and they still need help, because, we're supposed to care for our children, their physical and mental needs, but we also have to care for their souls, too. In my own case, we had two daughters that we just absolutely loved, and then we raised them, and then we were empty nesters, my wife and I, for about a year. But then teaching Sunday school, we met a couple foster kids, and we said, we told the foster mother, boy, it'd be nice to have kids like these because we really like them. And he said, well, actually, you can. So we adopted there's a 12-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. And so it wasn't easy, it was a roller coaster, but we got through it, with God's help and everything. And now we're, instead of just having 2 kids, I've got 4 kids, and we all love each other. We just had our little family reunion, and we're a very tight family.
Well, that's fantastic. And, I do hear, well, not enough people will adopt and so on and so forth. That's absolutely not true. The problem is it's cost prohibitive. The barrier to adopt is very, very high, which perhaps it should be. But it's I think between the cost, the barrier to entry, and then the ability to adopt, it just makes it so difficult for people that are on waiting lists. And then you have instances where they are on this waiting list and they go meet a child. And I just heard a story where for about 2 years they had lined it up. They were in adoption. They had spent all this time with this child. The child was still with their family while they were going through the process. And then the grandparents of the child came and said, well, we're just going to keep her. And so they spent and invested all this time. And it's, the proposition came to my wife and I once from someone from church who said, hey, would you guys, she was pregnant. She said, would you guys adopt my child? And I said, yeah, I would. I said, but the conditions are strict. The conditions are that when you give birth, you relent the child. You have to give up the child because otherwise you create a bond, and there has to be a separation. You can't just come around whenever. There has to be that line, because otherwise there's like a circumvention. It's like, well, I'm her mom, and it's like, well, no, we're her parents, right, or his parents. And so there are some really tricky things that I think has to be.
Well, I think we were fortunate in many ways that it turned out like it did. Because sometimes it doesn't turn out,
right?
But then again, whatever you can do, I wonder if you hadn't been there, what would that child have turned out worse? And then, and by the same token, I've talked to some people who are raised as foster kids. I remember one in particular who said, there's other kids in the family. She'd never got a Christmas present. Everybody else did, she was kind of like there because they get like a stipend, to raise them.
Yeah. Which I think is necessary, but it can also lead to abuse, and not just abuse of the child, but abuse of, well, I'm going to use this opportunity to make a career out of being a foster parent, which, that's a different rabbit hole. But I guess overall, I would also like to point out that Christians, by far, I forget what the exact statistic is, Christians by far adopt more children than any other religion, secular or otherwise, in the United States, and it's marginal. And so when people say to me, well, Christians don't adopt enough, and so on, or the Christians don't stand behind the pro-life, because if you're truly pro-life, you would adopt a child. It's like, there are plenty of them that do, and plenty more that would be more than willing to.
I think so, but there's also probably some that really just don't have the temperament to be able to do it. It's not their gift anyway.
Sure, and I agree with that. Well, that's fantastic to hear, because this is, I think, going to be a contentious issue now going forward in the state legislature. And this is going to be something we really need people to fight back on, and we need people to stand for God and stand for His moral law and stand for life.
I do think there's a lot of Republicans generally are Christians and conservative or tend that, but there's also a lot of moderates. And some are moderates in that they kind of become moderate, because otherwise they won't get elected, in the districts that they serve. But there's a kind of like a small liberty caucus, I think, within the 41 Republicans, and in the Senate too, that are kind of like have some power. They need us. We need each other. Like that. So most of the votes, there's 57 Democrats and 41 Republicans, but most of the votes during the session I was in went about 55 to 40. We all kind of stuck together. There were some common cause issues, and sometimes you can introduce an amendment that makes sense and all that. But I do think that there will be some backlash this election. Hopefully there will be, but it's up to we the people. And but I do think a lot of people are realizing, hey, they went too far. In 10 years, the population in Washington State in 10 years climbed by 13%, but we doubled the budget.
So you don't have a population to sustain, to generate enough revenue to sustain
per
the
person,
budget.
Taxes went way up.
Right. Yeah. And that's also one of the. Well, we're seeing population decline and stagnate across the board. People say, "Oh, there's so many people in the world." There are, but not here in the United States. We actually, I think it's forecasted in the next 20 to 30 years, and basically in the next generation, we're going to have a massive labor shortage. And it's not going to be because people don't want to work. It's because we're not going to have enough people to do the work. Yeah. And so then now we're getting into the weeds of where are we going to get the people from? So then you have to, immigration laws have to be loosened and so on. So there is a real fear among certain groups that and a lot of this has direct correlation to the pro-choice movement.
I hear that too. I've heard it both sides. But the other side is robotics and artificial intelligence will eliminate a lot of the jobs that we have now. So, but what's amazing to me is I was always, I never got involved in politics till in my mid-40s. And then, I was kind of an activist, like license tab tax. I really went out and put up the signs for and everything. It made a lot of sense. It was like a 13th car payment when you're just barely getting by.
Is that when it was value-based? That was before I lived here, but it was value-based at one point, correct?
No, it was just $30. $30 to.
Is that the Tim Eyman?
The Tim Eyman thing in 1998,
but,
and that's why Mike Fagan, and we got it down there. But then they kept finding excuses to challenge it and increase the amount of it, and then they knock it down. It comes right. It's just like I think Jefferson said. It's just what government does. It grows all the time. So you've got to take a stand and fight back against that trend, because especially where an area like the West Side is more populous, more density, because if you have 40 acres, you really don't need a lot of laws. But if you're living close to your neighbors, people, there ought to be a law. It's too noisy here, or the traffic's too bad, or we need more police. And so I grew up as a little boy in Seattle, and I remember that. But when I was a little kid, I could ride my bicycle all over Seattle. I felt completely safe. I'd ride down to the zoo and look at the animals all day, and ride back. And it was actually a lot of fun. I watched them build a Space Needle. But then I think where the things started to change, we lived kind of by the University District, so you could see, like in the later '60s, the hippies, that were
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy was there.
He was. I know. That's why I was saying.
But then the drug thing came in, and it's just no matter what we seem to do, it just is like the 7-headed hydra.
Right.
You cut one off and two grow.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And laws are really intended to prohibit more than anything, right? And so you don't know you need a law. I think you need a law until people are driving 100 miles an hour everywhere and crashing and dying all the time. So then you go, okay, well, maybe we ought to look at this and see, well, why are people crashing? Well, because they're speeding. So now we impose speed limits, right? And you do this on the highway, and then you do it, and you go, okay, well, now kids are being hit in residential areas because it's 60 everywhere. So then you go, okay, well, maybe in residential areas it should be 25. So you continue to restrict, and some laws are good, right? And some laws have good intent that are then bad. So you have laws that have good intent that turn out to be bad in practice. And I think one of my hangups is that we don't do enough to go back and repeal the laws that just don't work, because I feel like a lot of and I say I feel because I see this, and that a lot of the legislative representatives, a lot of them don't want to be wrong about anything. It's like, well, I can't say that I was wrong, because then that's weakness. It's like, no, that's a strength. If you say, hey, I did this and I'm wrong about that, me as someone who is you're representing, I would go, okay, well, hey, at least you admitted you're wrong. Like, how do we fix this now? Right? Like you said, we can amend bills. We can go back, and we have the ability to do that. And I think it's important that we do that.
But some people have a different view than we do. Oh, we need these bills.
Sure.
So one thing politicians have is they want everybody to love them. So we tend to, oh gosh, if I do vote for this, how many votes? They start calculating, how many votes am I likely to lose? How many will I gain? And so there's always that thought process going. But really, you can't follow that temptation. You just, I think some people admire that. Well, at least he's predictable. He is a conservative, and he will vote for these laws, but I don't like. But at least he's not. I think if you're just, okay, this is who I am, be who you are.
Yes. And
then let the chips fall where they may. And if God pulls you out of that, then maybe there's probably somewhere else he wants you. I think wherever you're at is where God wants you at.
Well, and it's funny you say that. So when you were talking in your introduction, you saw me taking notes, and what I had written, and it's I put a piece of paper over here, and I don't, but what I had written was, you ran for Senate, got 5% of the vote.
Yeah.
You ran for Congress, got 5% of the vote. You ran for Congress again, correct?
Well, yeah, it's like, almost 20 years apart.
Right.
Yeah.
So you ran for Congress again, you failed. But then you ran for legislature. And you are here and now in such a time as these that we have just had the biggest landmark decision in 50 years, that now the state of Washington has the power to legislate life and these laws that we thought we couldn't before. Because it was federally mandated, essentially. Perhaps the wrong term, but it was federally appropriate, so you couldn't really do much about it, except perhaps restrict, which is what led to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So now what I was writing down was, it's funny that people would look and say, well, he failed here, he failed here, he failed here, and I would say, based on your voting record and based on the conversation we're having, is God has you here for such a time as this, so that you can go and fight for his for his life, for life in the legislature.
Well, I think that's true. Man proposes, but God disposes. When I got elected treasurer, I had no idea I would ever be county treasurer. That was, like I said, something other people did, and a lot of people, well, you can't be that. You're not a CPA. Well, you have CPAs working for you. It's just a ministerial position.
Does everyone have to be a CPA?
Yeah, and then out of 39 county treasurers, there's only like 5 that are CPAs, so it really wasn't. I have a CPIM. It's certified in production inventory management. So you have scheduling and looking for efficiencies. That helped me a lot more than a CPA ever would when I was in that position. But I kind of exhausted everything I could possibly do. I think we had a lot better office after I left, but I kind of wanted a new challenge. Again, I never thought I thought Matt Shea would always be there, in that position in the 4th District where I lived. And, in fact, I was Matt's first campaign manager in 2008. And, and then Bob McCaslin went in, but I was already county treasurer, so I really couldn't leave that. But I always thought it sounded kind of interesting. Suddenly, boom, it happened out. I was going to run against Kathy McMorris, not because I thought I was going to win, but because I felt it gives you a bully pulpit when you do run for office, and you can bring up stuff that hasn't been brought up, that I think is very important, like our debt problem that I alluded to earlier. And I think the manipulation of markets is running, I think capitalism is great. Capitalism is the poor man's best friend. But we have a lot of crony capitalism, which I think is just piracy, that's going on out there. But you never really hear about it in the newspapers. You kind of have to study that. And, I've been faulted for doing a lot of research on the internet. But over the years, you find out who's been right about things. Or at least may not always be right, but at least they were trying to be right. They may have been wrong about something. So those are the people I listen to. Plus, I listen to my constituents, too. A lot of them are very intelligent, know a lot more than I do. So, it says in the Bible, a wise man has many counselors. So that's what people owe me. They owe me my paycheck as a representative, but they also owe me feedback. Well, I think you're wrong, and here's why. And then, so I've had great conversations, and sometimes, they've changed my mind about things by adding something to it that I was ignorant of before.
Yeah, and I think that's a fantastic approach, because a lot of times I feel like I don't just feel this way. It's true when I speak to people and I talk to my friends, and they say, I reached out to my representative, state, local, city council, whatever. Don't hear anything back. I give them feedback, and it's like they don't care. And I say, then vote them out. Then you need to use your vote, or continue to email until you get a response. I understand, because we understand you guys are busy. You're writing bills, you're researching bills, and we understand. I think, but it is important that we hear from the legislature, and it is important that you hear from your representative, and it is important that the representative gets feedback from the constituency. So it's good to hear that you have that level of transparency and integration into your constituency.
Yeah, one example of that, I got a lot of letters on people who wanted to have a constitutional convention again, which I think is a bad idea, but have an Article 5 convention, and it can be done. But I wanted to have like a town hall on it, but I couldn't during campaign season. So instead, the Assembly of God Church on Sullivan hosted it through the Free Enterprise Institute. And so I was just the moderator. I didn't take a position either way, but it was a lot of fun. I had like the head of Washington State, the Article 5 convention association that was arguing for it. And then I had a lady from the John Birch Society who was against the having an Article 5 convention on the negative, and it went back and forth for about an hour, and then we opened up to the questions from the audience. It's on YouTube if you want to watch it.
I actually heard about this, and it was, one, I was shocked that the church actually hosted it, which was fantastic, and I just really
They're not endorsing anybody. They just let us use the auditorium.
And that's perfect. And and I heard that it wasn't divisive. It wasn't. It was cordial, and everyone was. You were arguing points. You were arguing positions. You weren't name calling. I haven't seen it, but I've heard many people have told me just how fantastic it was. We need more of that. We need more of
rather
that.
than having I can have a town hall, and rather than listening to me speak and all that, I'd like to take an issue and have a debate on it. Let the experts, debate it in front of people. I think and this probably could get a little bit divisive, would be salmon and the dam, knocking down the dams. I think a lot of people in my district feel strongly one way or the other about that, and but it's a very complicated thing. And they all have their factoids, but you have to have fact checkers checking the fact checkers,
Right, yeah. How long does it go?
Well, your data says this. These guys study this data says this,
Right, and I have a lot to say about statistics because you can use them and abuse them however you want. So it's you really got to look at it yourself, I think, as an individual to truly understand what you're looking at, and don't just listen to this person said, oh, this percentage, and but really understand where those percentages come from, because they can be very misleading, and they often are intentionally misleading. So let's move on to, we're still on question 4 of life, but B, question 4 of life on the survey, issue B, and the issue application is, in January 2022, a new law went into effect in Washington State allowing minors to obtain gender reassignment treatment and surgery without parental consent. Another corresponding bill forbids insurance companies from denying coverage for these procedures, and further forbids insurance companies from notifying policyholders, i.e. the parents, of this coverage, which was SB 5313. The response was this new initiative should be repealed and or resisted because it is, 1, an affront to the integrity of life as God created it, male and female in his image, and 2, an assault on parental rights and responsibilities to direct, provide, and pay for the medical care of their children. And to be clear, this is a 2-part question. So the first part, you were strongly agree a 10, and the second part, you were strongly agree a 10. And now, you voted against SB 5313, and so what can we look at, and what can we look for you to do in the future to try and repeal this, to try and get this back and give the rights back to the parents, and say, hey, you have the right to direct the health care of your child?
Well, I think the party itself, they have experts been around a lot longer that can put it in the right frame to get it to pass, to do away with that. So, I at that point, I'm not even on a committee that would even, probably be like the health committee. Although I am on children, youth, and families, so who knows, it might end up in my committee too. Okay. So yeah, I would, the parents, it's just the way things have always been. If you mess with Mother Nature, then, and not like the goddess Mother Nature, just, what we think of as Mother Nature, natural law, sometimes children have to be taken away from their parents, but, it has to be proven to a judge in court of law, because sometimes it doesn't always work out. But generally, parents love their children and they want the best for them. And I think to let your kid go ahead without guidance like that is almost like a form of child abuse, because we have a responsibility to their health, their mental and physical health, but also we have a responsibility to their souls, and things like this are kill souls. It's been proven, over and over again. So, society is arbitrarily, where do you draw the line? Society is arbitrarily pick the age of 18. So after a child is 18, he can go on his way, unless he wants to live at home. But under that, parents still have the responsibility for their children. It's just easy. It's okay. This is the line of demarcation. Someone who's 19 might be doing different things differently than when they were 17, because they've gone, a couple more years through that process.
Like, I don't do the same things I did 8 years ago, right?
Well, stuff we were young. We had peer pressure to do things, and that weren't for our own good, know. And but you kind of have a little bit of, you have to prove it to yourself, a little bit of rebellion when you're younger. I think that these things are kind of a form of rebellion, and society the way it is. Modern Babylon, kind of reinforces that through advertising, and I think it's like there's real evil in the whole propaganda that's out there. I think there's people that actually do follow Satan more than the Lord, or probably
sometimes
completely,
unintentionally,
and then Satan himself, who directs those things. I think what he gets out of it, he's able to destroy people that were made in the image of God.
Yeah, that is true. And the Andrew Breitbart, he has a phrase. He says politics is downstream from culture. So really, what it says, what these bills say about us as a society is that society is in and of itself evil. Because if you truly look at this from a biblical perspective, we're looking at this and saying, well, we're giving the power to the state to direct the healthcare of my child without any input from me, which to me, well, for one, it definitely goes against parental rights. And two, it's insane because the child needs those parents to support them. So if a child walks into a healthcare facility and says, I think I'm a girl and they're a boy, that doctor now cannot refuse them the treatment that the state says is appropriate for that child. Now, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and actually up until recent times, we treated these things as gender dysphoria, and we treated them with psychology, and we got to the root issue of why do you feel this way? What is it that's making this happen? You know, and usually it was some form of trauma, and then once they get through it and they kind of look back and they go, yeah, that was, you know, I was just kind of going through something. And but now what the state is saying was, nope, that's not true anymore, even though we have 50, 60 years of literature and successful treatment of this issue. They're saying, no, that doesn't work. If you feel like a boy or a girl, you can be a boy or a girl.
Well, there's no boundaries anymore. And they've tried to get rid of boundaries so that a kid doesn't have any direction, especially if the parents say it's okay. There's about 100 of us that went up and protested the drag queen story hour up at the Spokane Public Library. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, and there was about 100 of us, but there was about 300 people that were all dressed nicely, parents that were supporting it, you know, up there. And I think if that had happened, you know, I don't know, maybe 70, 80 years ago, the guy probably would have been hung or lynched, you know, by people for doing something like that instead of encouraged, you know, and we're just not. We're homophobes or, you know, whatever, because that's the way society has gone. Anything goes.
Yeah. It's not that we're saying that that's okay, that they would treat it that way, but that society is now in such a place where people don't see the true intent that's right before them. That's right before them. We're saying that drag queen story hour is okay for less than 1% of the population. The 1% making the loudest noise are dictating 99% of policy. And it's how do we reel this back in and come back to some form of reality where we go, guys, this isn't normal. Like this isn't, well, for one, it's not God's intent for man and woman, and that's proven just in relationships. You don't even need the Bible to understand. If you have ever been in a relationship with a man and a woman, you understand there are distinct differences between the two. You don't need God to tell you that. You can just look at each of us naked and you can see there's a distinct difference, and that there's no gray area there. And even scientifically, there's no gray area. But people now care more about their feelings about something than they do about the actual truth and the evidence, no matter what is placed in front of them. So they're willing to accept evil concepts at face value just because they want to be accepting of something, not really even that they believe in it. It's just like, oh, well, I should be accepting of that. Well, but why?
Yeah.
Well,
and then that gets into legitimizing it by changing pronouns all the time, you know, who you are. Well, I'm a man, but today I want to identify as a woman, you know.
Or they, them, which just is grammatically incorrect, doesn't make sense. But then we further reinstill these ideologies by legislating it.
Yeah, that gives it legitimacy. And I think that's why they're being convicted by their sin, but if society says, well, hey, you know, God is wrong, it's really okay, God's old-fashioned about this thing, if there is a God, you know, then it kind of gives them, and if everybody claps when they have their pride parade and all that, well, that, you know, oh, we're okay, we're not doing anything wrong, so they're not really have to go through the conviction of being a sinner. But yet, you know, if you go by, you know, doctrine and everything we've been taught, you know, the ancient ways work best. There's consequences to that, you know, physical and mental and maybe how long you live, and also to your own family, too. I mean, children are treasure that you've got to, and then they'll take care of in the old age. But kids come from an environment like that. That's one of the big problems too. Is you think of 100 years ago or 200 years ago, families kind of stayed together. You're all in the same village,
Right.
all lived up closely. The parents had a role, but so did cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and all that. And then after World War II, we went to the nuclear family, and then a lot of people have been transferred all over the country, and I've got probably have cousins they've never met, the same blood is coursing through their veins. So, and a lot of the old ways, for instance, I had a grandfather who was English, and a grandfather who was Greek, and a grandmother who was Norwegian, and a grandmother who was Swedish, and my grandkids are like Europe Junior, and
Right.
everything. So, but we don't have the old folk ways. It's not
Right.
that much that if I try to say some of the things I heard my grandmother said, it just has no.
What are you
What is it?
yeah.
What are you saying?
Do you want liver and onions? Who eats liver and onions? Well, I do.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, right? But yeah, so we do. I mean, and that's true throughout time. We've always lost. I feel like we've always lost some of our heritage throughout time. Just
And that's why I'm a little bit jealous of like the tribes here. I mean, they've had it really bad and all that, but then they can look at the mountains around here and know that these are the same mountains that their ancestors were since the Ice Age. Have been looking at, and the bones of their people are buried here.
Yeah.
So there's more of it's more of a belonging to a certain place. Whereas I think in a lot of the American story, there's a lot of good things about it. We've kind of lost that.
Yeah.
If we.
You have to be intentional about keeping your heritage.
Yeah. Our trend, tell kids. It's good to tell kids stories about where your heritage did come from and why they came to America. Because for the first time in history, we could rule ourselves, and that was the American experiment. We, the people, could rule ourselves. We didn't have some king telling us, what we had to do.
Right. And so I would actually, so it's funny you bring this up because we are seeing a lot right now in education. And so we're just going to move on to question 8 on the survey of education. And this is, so the statement is that it is the fundamental right and responsibility of parents to direct the education of their children. The issue application is that critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and other like-minded programs are based on incorrect assertions and false narratives about our nation's history and culture. Additionally, critical theory, i.e. cultural Marxism, is an ideology-based victim, an ideology based on victim categories such as race can be found on specific curricula, but it is also a worldview that influences many academic disciplines. The underlying assumptions of critical theory drive the formation of policies and initiatives in many government schools. The response is that the above-cited programs and ideologies should not be implemented in taxpayer-funded schools. And you responded to 10 strongly agree. And the reason I bring this question up is that we do see this encroaching, and it has become a bigger and bigger and bigger issue statewide in taxpayer-funded schools. And so what is it that we can do? I don't think anyone argues, okay? So I don't think anyone argues that we should honor our heritage, okay? But when we start using that as a tool to degrade one race, and to say to one race, you're an oppressor, and say to the other, you're a victim. When we start using that as a tool, it becomes the thing that the policy was intended to prevent. So how do we get this or stop this from continuing to encroach into schools from a legislative level? How do we do that?
Well, it's propaganda. They're trying to build a new citizen in their fashion. I saw that. I used to be on Chase Youth Commission here in town, and it was a lot of those people. Government was God. Government was what gave them sustenance. They all worked for the government, most of them, or a nonprofit, and that made their decisions for them, and then they were trying to impart that into the kids. In fact, they wanted the kids to go to a camp where they taught them transcendental meditation. And And I said, well, look, a lot of people in the county, where I represent on the board here would not like their kids going to learning TM, and I'm not going to vote for it. So one thing they always wanted was consensus with everybody. So if you stood your ground, it would just all fall apart. Or else to have your kids, do it like a salmon dance, which is fine, if that's the way you're raised and all that. But, you start opening it up to, then you get into yoga and other things that are not doctrinal. For instance, I'm on the Children, Youth, and Family Committee, and they want to start having transitional kindergarten. It begins at age 3. Well, do you want the hand that rocks the cradle to be government or to be the natural parents? In fact, one of the sociologists that was there was even talking about prenatal learning. And so, what does that even look like?
Well, I think when I envision that, it's you put your headphones with Mozart playing in the background. You put your headphones over the womb.
Yeah, because parents argue in front of the child, and they suffer trauma, even in the womb, and I think that's just going too far.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I think the issue. I think though. What I see as someone who I don't have an identity crisis, and it's not because of the color of my skin. I know who I am. I know where I came from, and I know what I am today, and I know what I believe. I know who my God is, and I know what He says. And if I follow His rule book. In the Bible, and I follow His doctrine, and I follow His law, then I will live the best life that I could possibly live in His image. And I'm not saying that you are saved by works. I'm not saying any of that. You are saved by grace through faith alone.
Yeah.
But we still have to strive for something. We still need to be as good a person as we could be, because we need to be Christ-like.
Well, if we have faith, we will be.
Right.
From faith comes works.
Right.
But I think that they need to, you'll learn a lot at Playground 101. So I think, they need longer recesses. Forget about a lot of the STEM stuff, science, technology, engineering, and math. They just need to learn the ABCs, reading, writing, arithmetic, and recess is a good thing, because you learn sociology. I mean, you get picked on, you learn how to defend yourself. And if you pick on the wrong person, you're going to get a bloody nose. So, and that, but you know who you are. If someone's telling you you're different than other people, you start thinking that way.
But it isn't just saying that you're different. We're all different.
Right.
You and I are different. We're both white, but we're completely different.
No, but you're different, then you should be treated in a different manner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes an issue, is when you say you're an oppressor and you're oppressed, you're a master, you're a slave, you're a victim, you're, an oppressor. And it becomes so dangerous, because I'm hearing stories of kids coming home and saying, "Mommy, am I evil?" And she said, "Well, no, why would you think that?" "Well, because I'm white." And it's like, "Well, where did you learn that?" It's like, "At school." Well, hold on a second. And so you do have this huge movement of the school boards, which is fantastic, and people going, "Hey guys, like, you represent us, and you need to start reining this in. This isn't okay." But the reason I brought this up, and the reason I made the point I made earlier is, about my identity, is because I feel like Americans have an identity crisis.
Yeah.
I feel like I hear, even my white friends, I hear, "Oh, well, I'm Irish, I'm like, but you're not. You've never been to Ireland.
No.
You're about as Irish as my big toe. You're not Irish at all. You're an American. Why are we not okay in America with saying, I'm an American?
Well, a lot of it is, for instance, when I was a little kid, a patriot was a good thing to be.
Right.
Patriotic. And now a patriot is demonized. It's become a pejorative. You're a patriot. You're a right-wing wacko, a 1619 type guy that's, not that the West, doesn't have a lot to answer for in some cases, but still, I think Western culture, Paul heading west instead of east, with the Holy Spirit, I think it's come full around. In fact, there's a movement in China saying back to Jerusalem. Okay, it's the Chinese have suffered so much more than we have that they actually probably could evangelize the Muslims and be able to do that. So that's their thing. It's gone full circle from when the Holy Spirit told Paul to go to Europe instead of Asia. And it's kind of, and the thing, what they want to do, I think, too, is to destroy Western culture, to destroy the West. Then they can have globalism. I think this whole thing is headed towards globalism, the one world government, and we can start seeing these things down. That's prophetic.
Right.
that will be happening.
And we are seeing things come to light that looks as though it's leaning in that direction. It's just, it's so horrifying to me because, I see this critical race theory, and when I speak out against this, I am told you're just a privileged white European. You have no idea about the Black experience, and I say, well, I don't, but my wife's Black, and she knows about the Black experience, and she thinks this is evil too.
Yeah.
So, and I say, so now if you want to stop calling me names and calling me racist, do you want to have a substantive conversation about this issue? It's like, well, no, not really. It's like, why not? Why now that you just can't label me, why can't we sit down and discuss this issue? And it's purely because the agenda is driven to destroy culture. And it's driven to destroy culture as we know it. And the big thing, I think, and the reason why I'm kind of getting into this is, how can we stop this at the state level and ensure that the funds that are going to these local schools are not being used to back up and prop up these cultural ideologies?
Well, we just have to elect more people that think as we do, that believe as we do, and they need to be vetted too. I mean, some people, I'd say in my experience at the county, there's people in the county who are probably more Democrat, but they put an R behind their name because they know that they have a better chance of getting elected. And that happens a lot. So that takes some discernments and following people and then try to help good people. I was an activist for a long time before I ever got elected to anything. And so you got to, you may not have the money to cut them a big fat check or anything, but you can doorbell for them, instead of going to the Y and walking on the treadmill for 2 hours. You could go out,
pay to go somewhere
go out
to go
meet
to
your neighbors. Hey, I'm for this guy, and I think he'd be doing a good job. I wouldn't be out here doing this if I didn't think so. So it's something you can do. You'll become a precinct committee officer, and really there's 4 parties. It's not 2 parties. There's 4 parties. I think in the Democrat Party, you have a populist wing and you have an establishment wing. And the populist wing was Bernie Sanders. We, the people, loved him, but Hillary was the establishment wing. Same thing in the Republican Party. I think Ron Paul was a populist person, Trump also. But then you had McCain and Romney and Bush and those people that were establishment,
Right.
But what I really hate seeing is the middle class being destroyed financially. And, used to be you could, it's like the normal bell curve in the middle class, you could transition from one end to the other, depending on if you wanted to work hard or not, or had bad luck or not. But, there was most of the people were middle class. It was a lot of us. And now through, I think, taxation, we're being flattened. People have hardly enough money even to, a lot of us used to be able to tithe. It's really difficult to tithe, when you're being taxed to death, then you've got to, well, I'm going to give money to the church, or I'm going to buy earache medicine for my kid who's crying.
Or a $5 gallon of gas.
Yeah, or gas just to get to work, to earn the money.
What's funny is there is actually historical evidence that when taxes are lower, people tithe more. We are by far the most generous nation ever. And so we can, I truly believe the church has a role to play in our society and in our community. And I believe there is a feeling in the church that the church is taking a backseat on a lot of issues and let government kind of encroach. People say, well, it's not the church's position, but it is the church's position. The church ought to be out helping people, helping homeless. The church ought to be out witnessing in that regard. And there are a lot of churches that do this, and I'm not saying all, but I'm saying as a general majority, the church has taken a backseat. They won't speak out about certain issues. They won't speak out about political issues. They won't speak out about cultural issues because they don't want to offend anybody. It's like, well, I'm sorry, but at some point you have to love people with truth.
Or they think it's illegal.
Right.
Yeah. So, for instance, that's why I like the Assembly of God on Sullivan. They had a big auditorium just sitting there, and they let us use it, and you're not allowed the church to take a position on any candidate, but people could put out their flyers and things, and they didn't endorse anybody. So it's good to use even schools, have big gymnasiums that they're sitting there empty all the time that we could use. But they don't do that because they're I go out and doorbell churches sometimes. Oh, we can't take your literature because we have a policy against taking anything political. But it's so important. I mean, what are you preaching? You're worried about losing our values when I'm trying to, go to one of the best places walking into.
I believe the same thing you do.
Yeah.
And but what I'm saying is, if we don't have people who stand for God in government, we're reaping the repercussions of that right now in society. Yeah. So I 100% agree with you. Why should churches not distribute that?
Well, there's a lot of people there. So I went into some of the churches. I said, well, can I, out in your vestibule, can I leave this thing against gay marriage or allowing bathrooms in public places to be generic? And oh no, we can't do that, unless we let the other side come in. And well, why can't you just do it? Those are the big mainstream churches that and I'm not going to name them, but it's only like the little ones, and like the Slavic churches and the Latin Rite Catholic churches that actually let us go. We've got a lot of signatures, but not enough to for our initiatives to pass.
And it is true that they have to allow equal access. So then let the Democrats put their stuff in there. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen is you're going to see your pile go down and theirs is going to stay the same. Mm-hmm. If people truly believe in biblical principles and biblical values.
And it's very effective. That's why it's so demonized, I think, by the secular press so much. They don't want us to be successful. They want a world of their own making. But one thing I did too that was I introduced Matt Shea's bill, and actually before that, Senator McCaslin's bill to form a 51st state out of East Washington. And people, well, how could you do that? We get more money from them than they get from us. But I think if you had your family values, if you start out with a new governor and 2 U.S. senators and congressmen and a state legislature that reflected your values, and a brand new state constitution too, I think a lot of people would flock here and bring their businesses here, and that would more than offset anything, that we get from the West. And let the West, let my people go. We're just if we're costing you money, let us go and do our own thing. And so, my goal in that, anyways, do people really want it? Let's have a plebiscite or something, or advisory votes at the county level. And if people are so above 70%, well, let's keep going forward. If not, then let's forget about it.
Yeah, the problem is that even if you have a vote at the county level, it'll just get knocked down by the city. So the city will say, oh, no, we don't want this.
Well, but the county, that's where the auditor is. So the Board of County Commissioners, it doesn't cost any more to put an 11th item on the ballot than the first 10. There's a cost to it. But at that point, when you have an election, it doesn't cost any more to add other issues. Mm-hmm. That's what we've been trying to say. So if you had each county in Eastern Washington, could get the county commissioners to put it on the ballot, then we'd find out. So we're kind of working on that. It's going pretty slow, so maybe the timing isn't God's timing yet, But it's still something I'd like to see. And then a lot of people, if we just bring it to yes or no, do the people want it or not?
Yeah, and make it very simple to understand.
Oh yeah,
not a word salad. Just have it very simple. Do you want to be
it's
separated?
It's hard to do. There's so many acronyms and everything.
Yeah. Rob, it's been a pleasure. Very, very pleased to meet you. And can you just let people know where to find you, how to get in contact with you?
Oh, sure. It's at electrobchase.com, and that's my website. And, just contact me there. Or if it's a legislative thing, you can contact me, go to leg.wa.gov and go to the House of Representatives thing and find me in there and send me an email, and let me know what you think. Is there an issue you're having? I'm supposed to be representing you. Let me know, because I've met some wonderful people by doing that. And then my watchword, is to be a representative. How do you become a good representative? Well, Micah 6:8 says, what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with the Lord. And I think if I do those things, then I will be a good legislator.
Amen. So electrobchase.com?
electrobchase.com.
electrobchase.com. All right. Thanks, Rob.
Okay. Thanks you, Dale.